right. Matt Solomon, welcome to the Unfair Fight.
I'm happy to be here, especially since you had my co-founder already. So, I was getting jealous.
I know, man. That's so exciting. I was pumped to see you and Mr. Lancaster get the band back together and launch a new business. And I definitely want to get into kind of what you guys are doing over, with the channel program. But you know what I never heard is your story. Where'd you come from? How'd you get into this game? What led you to MSP? I would love to hear your background.
Yeah, it definitely in some ways kind of came out of nowhere in the channel, I'd say. But
Right.
I've been in sales and marketing for almost 20 years now, and started off in the legal industry and did that for a while. And I was doing that in New York, and decided to move back down to DC, and went through a headhunter. And it's one of those just weird stories where they had this government consulting company that asked me to interview. I interviewed with them. It happened to be Kevin's first company that he launched. And so I was doing government like sales, like helping companies get on the GSA schedule and things like that. And I gotta tell you, it was a pretty boring job. And I was like, I'm not gonna last more than a year or two here. And then he came to me with this crazy concept about dark web monitoring and credentials being exposed on the dark web. And I honestly had very little idea what any of that was. This is in about 2015, really
Right.
before a lot of people were talking about it. And I just took a chance because I was like, what do I have to lose? Government consulting is not something I'm going to be staying in. So I took a leap of faith. We started in the enterprise space. And, John, it was like a little before, it was almost like we were a little early talking about credential exposures for whatever reason. Like, OPM breach hadn't happened yet. The MySpace one, if you remember that website.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And then LinkedIn was the big one that really got into everybody's credentials, right? Because everybody has a LinkedIn profile. And so for like 8 or 9 months, we were just beating our heads against the wall at the enterprise level. And then I mentioned to Kevin about shifting maybe to the MSPs. We had talked about it. And man, it's like we did it. We had no plan. And in those early days, MSPs were actually telling us how to model our offerings because we had no idea.
Right.
And it just took off like overnight almost. And one of the online publications ran an article about us and literally went from 8 months of inbound or outbound efforts to 20 inbound calls the next day.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was the wildest thing. And then I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, we went from 0 MSPs to 2,000 in a 2-year period, then got acquired by Kaseya all in 2 years. And then by the time I exited there, we had 5,500 partners, I think, worldwide.
That's an incredible run. You know what's wild about the story you told? In our early days, before we had a 24/7 threat operation center and did MDR and all that fun stuff, we went and built what we would want to use, having kind of been offensive guys, to do defense, thinking we'll sell this platform to Fortune 500 companies, right? Yep. What we didn't realize at the time, in the very, very early days, is it really doesn't matter how damn good your tech is because they're scared to go with a tiny little company. You know what I mean? And we actually had the same thing. We kept running into MSPs and like, oh, this is cool. But it'd be more cool if it was multi-tenant and you guys did it for us. Right. Yeah. And that's what launched MDR. So we had probably, and now we're getting a bunch more enterprise customers. Right. So, it kind of comes, full circle, but,
yeah, and it was, we were talking we legitimately had meetings with the CIO of Starbucks, Walmart, Panera Bread, Best Buy, like 50 Fortune 500 companies. And it was just like, no, credential exposures, we've got other things to block that. And it's like, okay, but these are legitimate passwords that are just exposed of people in your organization. And it's just like for some reason, it just wasn't resonating at that time. Now, obviously now they all do, I'm sure they do dark web monitoring and things like that, but yeah, it was just so strange just beating our heads against the wall with Fortune 500 companies when somehow MSPs and small businesses, they understood it. So,
Yeah, it's incredible. So talk to me a little bit more on kind of the ID agent journey to exit. Because, what I'm really curious about is kind of how you developed, your product offering, but really how'd you start, promoting it and marketing it and some of the lessons learned from exiting, and where I kind of want to take this is there's a we're watching a ton of M&A and consolidation of managed IT service providers, right? It's
Yep.
going wild right now. And, I think sometimes when you create a software startup, you're kind of wired towards, knowing all the kind of check boxes you have to go through to make your company highly valuable. But I think there's some simple kind of lessons learned that you've probably been through that you can kind of, you kind of give to the MSP community if they're kind of considering, potentially exiting or merging. But,
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit more about the journey. What do you think, besides having a great idea at the right time when the dark web was hot and everyone wanted
Right.
to understand more, what other areas did you guys really lean into that you found created a lot of value for your customers and your company?
Sure. Yeah. Because I mean, it's important to note we did have a blue ocean product for about a year and a
Yeah.
half. It was just no competition really, and we really leaned in early on partner enablement. You
Okay.
know, we at the time we did a lot of stuff with Datto. Datto was doing tons of road shows at the time, and I had a chance obviously to meet Rob Ray, who everybody knows
Of
in this
course.
space at least. Um, and I just saw what the raving fans they created, and we were like, well, how do we get that?
Right.
And it just seemed like enablement was one of the biggest reasons they were able to do that. It's just they kept giving value back to their partners. They tried to make it as easy as possible to sell, backup. And we took that kind of the same methodology and created our version of a partner portal. Now looking back on it, I mean, it would probably look terrible compared to like some of the
Right.
PRMs and stuff today. But I think, we were early on that. Now it's pretty
Right.
commonplace, but outside of Datto, I honestly think ID Agent had the second best like channel program when it
Right.
came to enablement. And so, we also got lucky with hiring the right people. Hired people within the channel. Dan Tomaszewski was kind of our lucky
Right.
hire. He was CEO of an MSP, and he really understood what MSPs were looking for.
Right.
And so having that hire, and he really helped build that out. And it's a lot was just listening to what the MSPs wanted. You know,
Right.
creating product advisory councils, things like that. But I would say the enablement was definitely something that separated us, and certainly that was where we got the raving fans.
Right.
But we were very fortunate, in our product, we also had a sales tool, basically a prospecting tool where you could put the domain of any organization. Now, again, somebody listening now might be like, well, everybody does that now, but no
Sure.
one was doing this back then.
Hey,
You
yeah, first
put,
mover
yeah,
advantage for sure,
yeah,
right?
you put the domain of an organization and it pulls up the 100 most recent compromised credentials on the dark web. And so it was weird. It's like we were never really a security company, even though it was dark web monitoring. We were
Mhm.
basically a sales company. And I
Right.
think we actually helped the rest of the cybersecurity companies because our product helped get their MSPs in the door to talk about security at a time when they did not fully understand how to talk about security. And it's one thing to say like this could happen, and this could happen. It's another thing to say, hey, this is your actual password to your O365 logins
Of course.
on the dark
Yeah.
web.
Oh,
You
it
know,
gets real in a hurry. I had a friend of mine call me this weekend, and he's like, John, I just got a report of all these passwords of mine that are on the internet. I was like, I know, man, consider them all on the internet.
yeah,
Like there's been so many breaches, but it's still that powerful. And I'll tell you one thing, and I think this is a lesson learned maybe, for MSPs. When we went to build our own monthly report, we
yep,
started polling all of our partners, and some that weren't partners said, who has your favorite report? Hands down, it was ID Agent. And I think the fit and finish and the graphics and
mm,
everything you guys built. First off, it was like cake to create. It
yep,
got created in 2 seconds. It looked beautiful. It made MSPs, really punch above their weight on that kind of marketing, kind of almost like graphic arts fit and finish,
yeah,
and gave them a killer sales tool. And I just remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, this is gold. This is really, really well done. And I think that's one lesson learned. I always say it's so hard to run one network, let alone 50 or 100, however many networks you handle in your MSP, and there's fires going on all the time. But the one area I see a lot of MSPs not invest in is that fit and finish on graphics and presentation. And I would say that's one
Yep.
lesson learned from, I think what you guys were able to do is that it really just gives comfort, that this is a super professionally run company under the hood. So that was one takeaway I had from you
Yeah.
guys. Like, you were killer at the sales enablement, and the fit and finish was really nice. And that
Yeah. No,
matters.
definitely. Yeah. No. And just, because you framed around lesson learned. And, another thing that I would say is a lesson, and again, an MSP can take this and apply it to their audience. You also need to go where your audience is, not where you want to be always. Like, did I necessarily at the time? I mean, now it feels normal, I guess, but Facebook, I always thought, is more personal connections, right? Um,
Right.
but now, like, I'm on Facebook, I'm connected to hundreds of MSPs because that's where they are. They're on
Right.
Facebook, they're in Reddit, they're in Slack, and I don't know much about Slack, but I've started doing that because again, you have to go where your customers are going. So that I think that was another lesson, and I think we were pretty good at doing that. But I think if I was speaking directly to an MSP, is that's something you definitely need to focus on.
Yeah, when you
And
find that niche of customers or a vertical, like, become
yeah,
part of the vertical, right? Be at their events or their trade shows, you name it.
exactly.
So another thing I'm curious about is, obviously, you're one of the few people that have been through a successful exit, right? A lot of MSPs are getting approached,
Mhm.
and probably some are excited to do it and some are nervous about it, or maybe intrigued, or they merge. Like, any lessons learned that you remember that you would give to them, things you wish you would have done up front when you're in the diligence process or anything like that?
Well, so I'll have to give you a different perspective
Okay.
because I wasn't really involved in
Okay.
that part of it, right? Even though I
Right.
was the first employee, it was Kevin's company,
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
So I mean, by the time, and I can't even remember when I was brought into the know. So I can speak to it from the experience of an employee who's going through an
Oh,
acquisition,
that's fantastic.
because I just wasn't part of those
Sure.
conversations with Fred and whatnot. Um, it's as an employee, it's definitely challenging, especially if you become an employee that is in the know, because at
Right.
some point there's going to be, and it sucks because everybody wants to be transparent, and it doesn't
Right.
matter. But you have legal reasons you can't tell everybody,
Right.
and so that's, I think, difficult probably from Kevin's perspective, like having
Yeah.
to keep it under the hood at that time, and then even
Can't feel good.
no, it can't. It's not good. And then when
Right.
you're and on the executive team, it's now this insular group that is in the know, and so that was always challenging to not be able to tell all the team what was going on at the time. But um, for us, I'd say my biggest takeaways was understanding that there was, I think, going into it with the right expectations, because it doesn't matter who's acquiring you, things
Right.
are going to change. It doesn't matter how often people tell you things will, it's just,
Right.
that's the nature of it. You're
Right.
combining two companies. It's impossible to not see change. So, just being aware, of that you're going to have to be flexible and you're going to have to
Right.
adjust, and there's going to be different cultures, and
Right.
you're going to have to find your spots. And you know that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, was just adjusting and to a new normal.
Right.
And then you know once we were able to share more with employees, then it got easier, because then
Right.
you just build the team up and you talk about all the things you think are going to come out of it. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a chance sometimes to, like, fight with a bigger army, right? I mean, that could
yeah,
be a really exciting, component, and take all that hard work and intellectual property to the next level.
yeah, I
Makes
mean,
sense.
for us,
Yeah.
you just think about, like, obviously Kaseya is one of the big conglomerates in the industry, and so, like, yeah, having
Even bigger
access,
now.
yeah, well, yeah, way bigger now.
Super
But like,
big.
yeah,
Yeah.
having, I guess when you've started it from, like, when going back to when I was the only employee,
Right.
and I think about, like, my sales capacity, and then you're now with a team of hundreds of salespeople willing to sell ID agent. I mean, it's pretty exciting when you're starting to go to, like, hundreds of partners coming on each month, and
Yeah.
yeah, so
It's
that,
incredible.
yeah, the volume part was really fun. So
Some tactical things, I think are really important. Because this is kind of my second business. A couple, like, little things that seem, I think, when you're a small business in the early stages, that seem like, I'll do it later, it's not that important. Audited financials. I would
mm,
say, like, if I had any advice to a business owner who was ever thinking about, exiting or whatever, I don't care if you have $5 in revenue the first year.
Yeah.
get your financials audited every
Yep.
year. It really, I think, one, builds confidence, and two, frankly, it's just good business practice, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you ever want to bring investors. It doesn't matter if you're going to exit, or bring investors. I think going down that path is really important. A couple other things I feel is really important is a lot of times, I'll tell you, me personally, I came out of the agency, and so we're good at going after bad guys and doing our thing. But whole go to market thing, it was like, oh yeah, we'll build this product. I'm sure there's this problem it has to solve, but
Yep.
I would argue you have to start with data and how you define winning, and then
Hmm.
back into all your plans from there. Because the best product only wins 50% of the time, and the go to market is you know as if not more important, because you can have a wonderful product, but if you don't know how to get to your customer base and make a repeatable sales process, I've learned it's way more science than art. And so
Yeah.
the arts and the creative's the fun part that comes at the end, but that's not what makes highly valuable companies most of the time.
No, that's very true. And just as you're talking, I was thinking about
Yeah.
like documentation of processes. I think that's good to have, especially if you're an MSP and you're looking to get acquired. The more you know your numbers, um, that's that was probably one of the biggest lessons I think I learned going to Kaseya at that time.
Right.
One part was like we were just moving so fast with ID Agent. It's like,
Right.
in a way, I mean, I say this kind of like whatever, but like who had time to like worry about certain
Right.
numbers? It's like we
Right.
were closing. It was just such a focus on closing deals and getting our partners up and onboarded and stuff. But then when you start to get to like, you're like, oh, this is how a serious business is run in a way.
Right.
Like this is like you're like total game changer. And I know Kevin like has learned so much, being on the executive team,
Hmm.
about building out a processes to scale. I
Yeah.
would say that was probably the things that we learned the most there is scaling.
Very
And
data driven approach, huh?
yeah,
Cohort
yeah,
analysis. And that's the other piece of advice I would give is, if you're planning to grow fast, you need to hire someone that's been a few steps ahead of where you are right now, because you can
mhm,
grow so fast where what's good 8 months ago is woefully inadequate now. And I would say looking for an operational based chief financial officer is critically important, because I think a lot of times they can run models and metrics. You might have an idea or pricing, and they can call bullshit on it and realize your margins aren't really what you think there are.
yep,
You have all these other costs. And so, I think, you said it perfect. You have to really know your numbers. You need to know your retention rate, your average time to close, your average contract value, your cost of acquisition from kind of demand gen to close. I mean, all that has to go into a model, and when you understand that, you can model out. Now when to make investments in
yep,
people, or process. And so, it's I wanted to ask, because I know you're one of the few folks that have been through that, and I just know it's a really hot topic in the MSP space right now. So that leads us to round two,
yeah,
right? You and Kevin have launched, co-founders of, the channel program. We're customers, right? We
yeah.
love it. Big fans. How the heck did you guys come up with this idea? And where are you going with it? Get describe for those that don't know. Describe,
Yeah,
maybe the kind of mission and value that you guys are delivering to the community.
sure. Yeah, I'll start with how it even came about. And when both of us, and we exited at different times, but when I started a company called Channel Halo.
Right.
I was just doing consulting and working with both mostly vendors, but I was MSPs I was open to working with, just to help scale. And it was just I kept having the same conversations, particularly on the vendor side. A lot of
Hmm.
emerging vendors, if you don't, the questions were around, if you don't have $2 million, how do you build a channel program, things like
Right.
that. And of course, obviously, stay in touch with Kevin, and he was having similar conversations. And so then we were just like, there's something here. There's like a lot of new vendors in the space. They want to create a bigger voice for themselves. But then on the MSP side, like the MSPs only hear from a certain handful of vendors all the time. And, we know, and there's lots of acquisitions happening. And so we know that there's interest in, a broader scope of, of having access to different vendors. And so we just started slowly piecing it together, and it is an evolving and very quickly moving thing
Right.
that we're building. I would say right now, like if I would kind of tell you the mission statement is we want to become the number one source for MSPs to evaluate their stack. And the reality
Killer.
is, John, I mean, the amount of chatter, I did my own little weekend project. Look, I'm not
Right.
Forrester or
Right.
Canalys, but I went through a bunch of the Facebook groups and the and Reddit and stuff like that. 46% of the chatter is around two questions. Who do you use for XYZ?
Right.
And this product versus this product. 46% of the chatter. And
Right.
so we know that MSPs are constantly wanting to evaluate. And so what we wanted to do is create a more transparent community that's really based on a lot of peer-to-peer evaluation. So we launched channel reviews. Product, it's simply product reviews, and obviously people know about the G2s of the world, but
Of
the
course.
G2s are a catch-all for all technology, right?
Right.
And they
Right.
obviously do a great job. This is specifically focused on the channel. So if you're an MSP going in and you want to evaluate your stack, you can look at peer-to-peer reviews, and we just launched reviews maybe 3 months ago. We're about to approach 800 reviews.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
and we're asking, I think, really valuable questions, and actually really valuable back to the vendors as well. Because two of the questions we ask, and we just added these recently, is what new features would you like to see in the product, and what improvements would you like to see? It's crazy, like even though that's like one of the most obvious things you would think as a vendor you'd want to know from your
Right.
partner base. A lot of vendors are really bad at collecting that information. I don't
Yeah,
know
it's not
why.
easy. It's not. I mean, you can ask
Right.
your existing ones, but a lot of times they're just big fans and they don't tell
Yeah,
you. You
yeah.
want the slightly curmudgeony ones that are
So,
run a sophisticated business, right?
yeah. So, being able to put all that in one place, and again, as an MSP, if I'm looking at evaluating a product, I get to see what people are asking for and what they don't currently have, perhaps. And yeah, so we're building that out, and we've got these things called stack charts. So you'll be able to legitimately look at BCDR or
Right.
MDR and see based on product reviews how everybody stacks up. And again, it's completely from their peers. Like
That's
it's pure,
fantastic.
it's pure content. So, and that, at the same time, giving them an opportunity to hear from vendors. We have the monthly channel pitch events
Yep.
where they can attend anonymously. So they're not slammed by sales calls the next week. But, John, if they like your message and they want to hear from you, they
Right.
can respond and say, we'd like Blackpoint to reach out to us. And so it's just a different way of doing it and trying to build out a more holistic approach beyond just in-person events. And I love in-person events,
You're right.
but it can't be the only way vendors and
No,
MSPs communicate, you know?
I got to tell you, obviously we love in-person events because that's the awesome time to meet customers and
Yeah.
prospective customers. But I kind of feel like in our space, it's quickly turning into a bit of a monopoly of a
Mhm.
handful of folks, and you're watching the prices just go through the roof.
Yep.
And there'll be a tipping point. Any good vendor really only wants 50% of their lead gen to come from
Yeah.
events because they're the most expensive form of leads. But if I could paraphrase what you guys are doing, on one hand, you're creating a really level playing field for large vendors all the way down to small new upstart vendors to get their message across and allow your customers, which are the MSPs,
hmm
to learn about new solutions, offerings, while not having to get their email and phone blown up in the typical 5 contact BDR machine that everyone runs, right? So that's
Correct.
step one. And
Yeah.
then step two, you're almost crowdsourcing, uncut reviews of MSP technologies from MSPs. So I kind of feel like, when I look at like Gartner, Forrester, they don't really cover MSP. No one really
No.
covers it well. And I feel like you have the opportunity to become like the Forrester or Gartner of the MSP space, which I think would be
Yeah.
incredibly valuable. I guess the big challenge and trick is, making sure, as soon as people realize the model, then all the vendors are going to try and figure out how to influence all the reviews, right? So you have to just figure out how to kind of modulate that. But I mean, I think you guys know the space, so you'll be able to handle that easily.
Yeah. It's kind of like we tripped into the data part.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There's going to be, we're going to be coming out. We're hiring right now some data analysts. So that's
Excellent.
100% a direction we're headed. and that's going to benefit both sides of the community. I mean, on the
It
vendor
will.
side, there's amazing data that you can get just based off of responses and things like that. But yeah, for the MSPs, is what they'll be able to get industry reports on, product categories and things like that. That'll really provide them value. So no, absolutely, that is a direction we're headed. And again, we may have backed our way into it, and not definitely didn't start off that way.
Listen, a lot of things work that way, right? It just,
Yeah,
you got to be in the game. You got
yeah.
to be in the game. If you're not
But
in the
like,
game, you won't have these opportunities to back into something, right?
yeah, and part of my message, and I do mean this sincerely,
Mm.
is that and it's both to the vendor and the MSP community. There's just not as many agnostic communities left, and
Right.
so, like, in some ways, I'm saying to the vendors, like, hey, you guys have to invest in this, because
Yeah.
if you don't invest in this, you can't complain if
Right.
you feel like there's no agnostic communities, because
This
communities
is
need
one.
dollars and partners.
Yeah.
And on the MSP side, it's like, we're giving you guys as big of a voice as we can possibly do. Like, you
Right.
have the opportunity, and we're not a Reddit. Like, you have to put your name on the review. And actually, John,
Yeah.
one really
That
cool story.
frustrates the hell out of me, this karma point crap. I feel like there's a point where your karma points are too high, and it's like, what do you do every day for a living? Or, okay, you're on Reddit every day. Got it.
Yeah.
Like, is that the guy we want the advice from? I don't know. There's
Yeah.
you don't see a lot of major CEOs with epic karma. I'm just saying.
No, for sure. And and we do give incentive to the MSPs to participate in the reviews. So for the first 3 reviews, we do offer $15.
Right.
But I want to specify, that doesn't mean you have to give people 5-star reviews. You can
Right.
do whatever you want.
Right.
We're just trying to get you engaged in it. But I think this was a pretty cool story the other day. So we got one of our first 1-star reviews. We knew it would happen, right? We knew one of our vendor partners who's a paying customer of ours, and that's
Right.
it. Kind of sucks, right? Because you're in a tough spot. But here's what I did. I reached out to the vendor. I said, I haven't approved this yet, but
Mhm.
I want, we're going to approve it, but I'm giving you 48 hours to reach out to the customer, because I know as well as anybody that miscommunications happen and people can write a bad review just in the moment.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the MSP. I said, hey, saw your review. We're a transparent community. I will publish it, but I did want to give the vendor a chance to reach out to you. And long story short, they've both agreed to have a conversation. He said, hold off on the review. And, hopefully I saved the vendor an actual deal.
Right.
And then on the flip side, hopefully fix the situation for the MSP. Now, it might not always work out that way.
Of course.
That's what we're trying to do. Like, that's the good karma that we're trying to bring.
Well, you know what I really like about it is you're kind of giving an equal platform for vendors to get their message out, big and small.
Yeah.
But a feedback loop to get a lot more review in data in a more structured way that can also get back to the vendors to make their offering better. Because honestly, that's gold. That's market intelligence that every vendor really wants. Because at the end of the day, I don't think there's a lot of vendors that set out to suck, right?
No.
Some might not run a great operation or have the right folks, but most vendors, when their customers tell them, and there's enough data to back it up where they can make a financial case, because let's be honest, that's how it all goes. There has to be a business case, a demand, a business case. You know how to do it at the profit margins you need to hit. I think that feedback loop you guys are creating would be incredibly valuable for vendors and the MSPs, because the thing that will make vendors listen is highly structured data that is clean, right? Because then you can put it to use, right? And I think that's really good for the communities. And like, me joking about Reddit and karma points, I still love Reddit. It's great. What I hate is the anonymity and the trolling. It's like, because half the people would never say that to your face, especially if they knew or knew backgrounds or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's a great. That's why I love the other ones. I love MSP Geek on Slack.
Mm-hmm.
I love MSPs Are Us on Discord. I love those spaces because it's live, interactive. Reddit's a little less in my. I like it, and I think there's great info, but those two communities and what you guys are doing, I think it's fantastic. And the Reddit community is super great too. Man,
Don't
talk
don't,
about
don't, 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 yeah. If don't, you can't dog the Reddit community.
No.
They're going to come after you now.
I'll get crushed.
I'm
I'll
just
get
kidding.
crushed. No, I like the Reddit community. It's just like, if you want to say something, say who you are.
Yeah. Well, and
don't hide behind the keyboard.
Yeah. And another thing we haven't surfaced yet, and I do think it will benefit both sides. when they do a product review, we actually ask them if they're willing to be like a reference referral
Right.
for your organization. Because and I'll speak from the vendor side first. Vendors historically will have like 5 go-to MSPs that they use in their testimonials. And by the way, it's the same 5 that everybody else uses. I don't know why, it's like the same people. And it's always bothered me. And I was just like, because
I wonder if it has anything to do with partner advisory meetings in really nice places. I'm just
could be.
Some have become pros at this. I've caught on.
Yeah. So we, in that, so I can like, there's companies out there that I have literally, based on their reviews, I have 20 MSPs that have said they'd be willing to be a referral for them or a reference.
That's incredible.
So be able to surface that information for the vendor, but then I also think it gives the MSPs more voice because, and I know Cody's backstage, we're constantly looking for MSPs to have on webinars and things like that. And it was always a mission of mine. I didn't always want to hear from the same MSPs because again, there's a group, and there's a group for a reason. They're thought leaders, but there's also people who just haven't had access.
Yeah.
And so I think when an MSP is, volunteering themselves in that question, then it gives you Blackpoint a chance to reach out to those 20 MSPs and say, hey, we've got a webinar coming up on XYZ. Would anybody like to participate? And I think that again, gives more voice. It gives them a chance to promote themselves as a thought leader. And so those are like some of these small things.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for their brand as well. And what I've noticed is some of the largest MSPs, I mean, I'm talking guys, 50,000 endpoints under management plus, you never see them in any of these traditional forums. They actually don't participate at all. And I would argue they might have some of the best advice to give, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And so, this platform, to get them out there and feature them as well as the smaller ones, because everyone goes through this kind of life cycle of their business growth, right? Some want to keep it as a lifestyle business, which is awesome. And, others are kind of on this hyper growth track. So kind of speaking of the growth side, you are an absolute business development and content marketing machine. If you had to give 3 pieces of advice to an MSP to up their business development, what would it be? Not to put you on the spot. I know we didn't pre-coordinate any questions for what it's worth.
So, I probably would go back to, being where your customers are,
right,
or your prospects. And man, sometimes you gotta really grind. Like I cannot even tell you how much time I've spent connecting to people on LinkedIn.
Right.
But what it's done is it's created me this universe of like, I think I have like 12,000 connections, 13,000 connections. Now, of course, they're not all my best friends or anything, but it gives me a chance when I'm doing events to promote to certain people and audiences and things like that. So, being where your audience is and connecting with them in whatever format that is, whether it's, we've talked about all the different forms. We just did this, and you guys have participated in the past. We just did this all-star event, and we brought in Damon John. And, you don't have to bring in that level of a speaker,
right?
But the collective effort of doing a joint marketing initiative, I think, can exponentially increase your reach and hopefully create a much larger lead list for you. So for us, for this event, we've teamed with 13 different vendor sponsors, and everybody promotes the event and everybody gets the collective top of the funnel, list.
Mm-hmm.
For an MSP, it doesn't have to be at that scale, but you can find a local law firm, you can find whatever professional services, whatever makes sense for and find a local celebrity. It could be to me, the easiest one, lowest hanging fruit is a sports person. You could a retired sports, athlete that's really popular. Any professional athlete's going to have a pretty cool story. I mean, they've reached the heights. Whether they're a Hall of Famer or not, they've reached the heights. So,
it's pretty hard to be a pro. I tried. It wasn't even close. I topped out at Maryland.
Did you? Wait, what sport were you again? I forget.
I played tennis.
Tennis. Okay. Got it.
And I got beat pretty bad by a lot of the ACC schools.
Got it. Yeah. Well, my track and field career was 2 days at Towson University. So.
Right.
But yeah, just getting with that local, partnerships, to me, that's a fantastic way, to get the word out. And then this might not be the best advice from a business development side, but just like it's business development marketing, right? It gets back to just honing the proper message.
Right.
You know, we talk about this on Channel Pitch all the time. You've got to figure out what makes you different.
Yeah.
You know, and an MSP that's right that they offer a lot of the same services. So you have to figure out what's your special sauce, and that's what you need to lean in heavy towards and spread the word and make sure people, get
Right.
that. And then maybe the final thing would just be take, you do have to be on LinkedIn right now. It's again, like I said, go where your communities are, but like I know people have whatever feelings they think they're not going to get business and things like that. But if you put out content, thought leadership content, you'll start to create a perception that you're a thought leader in your space, and then
Yeah.
vendors will have you as panelists and things like that. It just kind of grows on itself,
It sure
and then
does. Yeah.
all of a sudden everybody looks to you as the thought leader, and you get to re-promote that to your network, and they see all these panels you're on. And that's why I encourage MSPs, get on the panels with the vendors, because it's
Yeah.
one, there's the peer-to-peer kind of thing, but then you can then take, hey, I was on this event with John, and here's the interview where we're talking about struggles of small businesses in cybersecurity. But that's an easier content to digest, and they're like,
Right.
wow, how does Bob get on everybody's? He must know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you have to be in the game. You have to play it every day. And I think, a couple things, especially if you're an MSP with a kind of a local footprint or, regional footprint. I mean, a couple playbooks I would go to. Every local chamber of commerce event, I'm there and I'm
yeah,
sponsoring whatever I have to sponsor. Step one. Two, I'd become best friends with the law firms and the local insurance brokers.
hmm
Because if you think about the customer of the law firms and the customer of the insurance brokers, they tend to be the exact customer
yeah,
profile of someone that would use MSP services. And oh, by the way, you can kind of cross share leads because the insurance guys want to sell cyber insurance and
perfect example.
and everything else and auto whatever to their customers. So I think you're spot on. Like, you know, get in the game in your local business community, be there at every event, be present. LinkedIn, nonstop content creation, get on the panels, leverage your vendors, I would say is another one, right? For
Yep,
thought leadership and
100%.
to build just bring a more sophisticated kind of fit and finish and presentation. And then really just copy everything Matt Solomon does because you're an animal at it. And, I think one of the signs of success when you can't like open LinkedIn any day and not see some video from Matt, like
Well,
by default, your brand's out there everywhere. It's
yeah,
fantastic. I
yeah.
think
I'm
it's
sure I
key.
annoy the hell out of some people, but
No, I
yeah,
love it. It's great. It's great. It's great. You guys are, Maryland folks, and so are we, and we love it inside and out. You guys are doing, you and Kevin and your whole team are doing just an amazing job. I love watching Act Two, and I'm telling you, man, I think the data side is going to be your secret weapon. It's
yeah,
really, really impressive, and I just love a much more fair, kind of balanced view of reviews, if that makes sense. Because sometimes like the loudest folks talk the most and squawk the most, but don't necessarily have the most informed opinions. And so it's
yeah.
really good to get a lot of folks out there. So, Matt, much appreciated for everything you guys are doing with the community. And, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And any events coming up you want to kind of just drop out there
Uh,
for the audience to pay attention to?
so I mean, each month we have our monthly channel pitch events. So we're bringing on 8 vendors. They get 7 minutes each. You get to attend anonymously. It's free. A lot of times we also even give you a $15 Amazon or Uber Eats gift card for just participating and giving your feedback.
Right.
So that's coming up in probably the end of this month. But it would just if you register for the platform, you have access to all of our events. Almost everything we do is usually free for the MSP community, and we've got some really exciting things coming up in 2023. I'll kind of tease some of them.
Okay.
We've got channel deals, and I know I probably have to get in touch with Cody backstage. Where what's cool about this is it's because we're so agnostic that we can leverage the power of all the vendors, where we're going to have vendors constantly updating any special offers they want to make to the community. And it's one thing when you're offering 5 vendor offers. We are already working with 90 vendors. So
It's
can you
incredible.
imagine an MSP being able to look at a list of 90 potential offers out there and things like that? And we're really looking at what in this space is not consolidated into one place to make it easier, for the MSPs. And then, that also makes it easier to communicate with the vendors. So we got some pretty exciting stuff. We got an events calendar I would just tease it because I don't want to tell everybody what it's going to be, but it's going to be pretty badass, and it's for both sides of the community. Everybody's going to benefit. So really excited. And then the last thing I'll mention is, in 2023, you always got to evolve, right, John? I mean,
Right.
One of the things that we've gotten a lot of requests for is doing a competitive pitch. So right now we've only brought on like 8 random vendors at a time, and really not competitive.
Right.
So probably in 2023, you're going to see in February 6 backup companies doing a pitch together and
wow.
being more product specific, right? So because then
so
you get
going to play.
I there's always going to be a couple vendors that aren't going
to play. I was just calling that out.
I knew you would. And it's not necessarily meant for everybody to call each other out. It's really to give your pitch, and but the benefit really for the MSP is, again, they're looking to evaluate their stack. Imagine being able to save the time of not having to sit on 5 demos. Oh, let me just hear from the 5, and maybe y'all reach out to 1 or 2.
That's pretty fantastic. Can you do it Coliseum style, where they give you a bracket where nope, you lose, you're out of the tourney?
Yeah.
Killer.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it'll be a good service for the MSP. Matt, listen, brother, it was awesome having you on. Much appreciate your time and everything you and Kevin are doing for both sides of the MSP community. It just makes us better, and it makes us serve our customers better, and the MSPs get better tools and products. Competition's a good thing.
Yeah, no, man, we appreciate it. We appreciate all the support. Like I said, we wouldn't be possible without vendor support, and we're just going to continue fighting for more transparency in the industry. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Until next time, and hopefully we see you down in Florida here next week.
You will, for sure.
All right, man. See ya. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John.